Onassis Foundation.
Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis L.A. and Dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengräber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Alexandria House.
Yes, hello. Could I please speak with Judy Vaughan?
Yes, hi. This is Judy. I grabbed the phone.
Oh, how wonderful, Judy. It's such a pleasure to speak to you in these very dark times for the Quarantine Tapes. I'm very glad that you can take my call. Tell me, how are you doing and how is the Alexandria House doing? And if you can say something about what the Alexandria House is also for our listeners.
Sure, I can do it, Paul. And it was great to get your email. I remember that conversation with other folks really was great. I guess the word is fondness. It was a great discussion. So I was happy to get your call.
And that discussion, I should say, was really important, and I think in a way is very important now. It was all about listening. Megan Ketch convened people here at the Ola House on Onassis L.A., and we spoke about how important it is to listen. And perhaps in our time now, the difficult time of the quarantine, listening is also important. But I'll let you talk now. I will listen.
Okay. No, but thank you for giving that context. So, as you know, Alexandria House is a long-term shelter for women and children who are homeless. We work out of 2 side-by-side houses. We also do a lot of work with our past residents to make sure once they're able to move into permanent housing, into their own places, which is our mission, they're able to stay in housing. And then we're also a neighborhood center. So we've been in the community for almost 25 years. We do a number of different programs for folks living on our block or around the corner. So that's a little bit how we are. We actually had a visit from public health, and they helped us understand how we needed to get ready, what best practices would be, and most of those were already implemented. There were some changes that we needed to make at the beginning of when LA was really paying more and more attention. I think the one that really struck me is when it was Safer at Home. I think that's what it was called, I think by our governor, Safer at Home, or by our mayor. And it just was so with me how many people don't have homes. There are just such a growing number of folks who are homeless in LA. Yes, you may be safer at home, but does that really mean, are you safer if you're on the street? How do you ever do 6 feet distance when you're living tent by tent by tent? And when the public health people came here, it was like, did you have hand sanitizer everywhere? You know, how do you set up hand sanitizers when you're talking about such really huge crisis for those who really don't have a home, might not have access to hand sanitizers, and are living on the street? Here at the house, I think we sort of had it together. We did stop holding hands when we bless the food before dinner, and we're very careful about serving food and wiping down surfaces. But I don't know if you know, Paul, about a week ago, it was March 19th, really. We had a fire.
Yeah,
we had a major fire.
Tell us about that, and tell us both what happened and what happened to the residents and what they're doing now and how they are coping, and how you as this extraordinary leader of the Alexandria House are trying, I imagine, to bring them back together.
Yeah. So it started in one of the residents' rooms. She had gone downstairs. It was right after midnight, so almost everyone was in their rooms and asleep. when she came back upstairs, so we're still not sure what was the cause of the blaze, but when she came upstairs, her room was on fire. Luckily, and right, the residents, the families there were right on point. We had 5 families living there, including 12 kids, all under the age of 10. And every single family was able to move quickly, grab their kids, get out. No one was hurt. Everyone was safe. They all came over to the yellow house. We're in 2 side-by-side houses. So that's the miracle of it all, and for what we're extremely grateful. But the house is pretty damaged. We're going to be able to rebuild, but it's probably going to take 3 to 4 months. We met with the residents sort of in the middle of the night, and everybody, because we're known in the neighborhood, we're most supportive. What can we do? We got warm blankets and clothes for the kids. Let's see. We asked the residents, though, what they wanted, and actually they wanted to stay together. They had been together. Most of these families have been here for a longer period of time. Our average length of stay is about 11 months, and most of them were getting very close to moving into their own places. So we were able to get a motel room for each one of the families right around the corner, so they could still come back for childcare. They could still come back for meals. They could still come back for other kinds of support. Right before that, L.A. Unified closed, so we had put in place sort of a school assistance program for the kids. They could still come back for that. And I think what was most touching was the outpouring of our supporters to really hear what was needed. When you talk about listening, really listening to hear what was needed and to help us out.
As I hear you, as I hear you, Judy, in the midst of this extraordinary tragedy, you still find a way of feeling hopeful.
Once everybody was safe, Paul, if there had been any kind of hurt or, God forbid, death, I think, that we would have gotten through it, but that would have been just a level of dealing. But the fact that everybody grabbed their kids, helped each other, all got out, then everything else kind of can come together. And so that's, yes, I am hopeful, because not only everybody is safe, we can rebuild, and there needs to be houses like Alexandria House that give hope, where people can see that homelessness is just a situation that people find themselves in and really need the support of a community to be able to move on and then stay in permanent housing and are able to give back. Actually, and then I'll see what other questions you might have, but the hotel where they were staying around the corner, because they have no business, were closing. And we were just able this morning, we were able to, through the support of a donor, have 4 of the families moved into an Airbnb. One of the families moved in with our past residents, and one of the families we were able to reunite with their family. So there's movement. It's how to stay focused and how to stay strong. And I'm forever grateful for my faith, because I do believe that there is unconditional love, and there's nothing that can separate us from this strong power of overcoming incredible obstacles to move forward in justice, peace, and love. So, I am hopeful. It doesn't mean it's not without its challenges and not without its, real sadnesses. But if you have a community of support, then, really a lot of things are possible.
Well, precisely, the question I had for you is, how does your faith fortify you amidst this global crisis?
Well, it's really believing, coming out of a Christian tradition, is like there's nothing that can separate us from the love of God. That obstacles and and flood, famine, fire.
You've had a few.
There's
You've
nothing
had you've had a few of
and we've had a few of those. And I think our country, as well as our world, is going through some of that right now. And it's how do you stay faithful? There are ethical dilemmas in all of this, Paul. And if I'm not talking too much, I just want to share. You said something about being the leader. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like people are encouraged to do work from home. And we have said that to staff, do work from home. What's ironic is I live here. So, even if I have to go home, I am home. But that's kind of a blessing. So, but we're a house of hospitality. And so that means people come to our doors. And how do you greet people in the midst of being told keep 6 feet distance? Yeah. How do you help people who are coming right off the street where there really aren't enough, there's no dumpsters or showers or hand washing stations or bathrooms even. So I'm just trying to win my way through hearing how people are feeling. I think everyone's looking at this coronavirus in different ways. Everyone's looking at what needs to be done to stay safe in different ways and really respecting that. But in the end, I had to just go back. I went back to the Holocaust and the humanity that people were able to maintain in the midst of horrific conditions that far exceeds anything we're experiencing right now. How do you maintain like a Elie Wiesel? How do you maintain the kind of humanitarian spirit in the midst of horrific events? And I just think we need to find center in ourselves. That's what I'm trying to do. Like, what's my center? And maintain that even in the midst of having to make some difficult decisions. So it's a really challenging time. It's a real test for who we are, who each one of us sees ourselves as, and what we're called to be, even in these difficult times. I don't know if that made any sense, but
about 4 years ago, you gave an interview to Kazan Today, and I want to read a response you gave and have you comment on it. In a way, it's a way of making what you've said now, which is so moving, so essential. It truly touches me deeply. But I want to read this back to you, words that you pronounced, and have you unpack it further. You say, as a Christian, I believe that the transcendent can be made immanent, that the vision that Jesus shared of a beloved community is possible, at least in glimpses here and now. That's what Alexandria House is for me, a glimpse and promise of what is possible. A beloved community where people come together from all different life experiences, cultures and languages, and learn how to respect and be there for each other. And in those moments when this happens, it is miraculous. And that notion, I believe that the transcendent can be made immanent. Help me understand that more deeply.
Thank you for reading those words. Yes,
They're
because our mission, well, it's good to hear them. I don't know who said them. No, I'm kidding.
I think
yeah, right. Our mission at Alexandria House is really to be that beloved community. And it's a struggle sometimes because it's not, people are welcomed around the table. And there's been a lot of glimpses of that in these past weeks. Even the fact that the 5 families coming from very different backgrounds, very different life experiences, even first languages, said that night, we want to stay together. We've been together. we know each other, we trust each other. Can we stay together even though they couldn't stay here? That to me is a sign that everything you hear about antagonism between groups or just the division that exists in the society and sometimes even hatred, it can be overcome. And then the very next day after the fire, we had a meeting among both houses, all the women that were here. And one of the concerns that had been expressed by one of the kids was the comment, "Mom, does that mean we're going to be homeless again?" He was the oldest of those, 12 kids that came out of the greenhouse. And what we could reassure people is that sort of once you're part of Alexandria House, you're always part of Alexandria House, that they weren't going to be alone because so many times something happens and the trust they had put in a system or another person is sort of betrayed. And what we could assure people, and we're committed to that, is you're not going to be by yourselves in this. We're going to do everything we can to do our mission. Our mission is to help you move from here into permanent housing, which then lets you decide your own what kind of connection is still good for you to be in terms of Alexandria House community. So that assurance that people weren't going to be by themselves, as well as the demonstration of the folks who had been impacted, that they really saw themselves as a community, was one of those transcendent moments that was made imminent, even in the midst. This was like less than 24 hours after the fire had happened. And yes, there's some obstacles to that. A few people have asked, well, why didn't you just look for other shelters and, kind of get people in other shelters? There's a lot of dilemmas with that. One is there's not enough shelters for the number of homeless people that exist. So to automatically think we're going to be able to find shelter is not really on point. The other is that people wanted to stay together and didn't want to have to restart another program. And if we could do that, and we did it with the help of a lot of people who know our work, who come because when they come here, they have a hopeful sense. So much of what is portrayed and put out and is the reality for a lot of folks who find themselves without their own place is that of isolation, being by yourself, really ending up depressed or with other forms of mental illness. But if we can come together and support each other and find ways to see each other as equal in our humanity, then we can move over. And the other kind of miracle thing is we were able to find an Airbnb, but it was important for one of the women to stay close to the house, even closer. And the very next day, 5 of our past residents who lived down the block or around the corner from us said, we can take people, we'll take people. And so one of the moms with a very young child is just right down the block from us because a past resident knew what it was like to be homeless, didn't want anybody else to have that experience, and opened her door. And that's the kind of amazing things that keep me hopeful. Yes, it's my faith, but it's seeing people who act out of their humanity, their spirit of goodness and kindness that really challenged me to do more.
What you're talking about is real solidarity.
Yes, I love that word.
I mean, why do you love it?
I love that word because I'm a longtime activist. I think you know that, Paul, from other conversations.
I do, and I've read about you, and my goodness, have you put yourself in harm's way for the beliefs you maintain?
And solidarity for me, it's a kind of an active expression of that beloved community. So we can say the words, but how we demonstrate it by what we do. that's to me is solidarity. And the other really important piece of it, and I think it's one you talk about all the time, it's understanding that those who are most impacted by whatever the injustice or whatever the crisis is really has sort of a privileged message that needs to be double listened to in terms of determining what work needs to be done. So the women who are homeless at the house, when they say, we want to stay together, is there any way we can stay together? We listen to that. And yes, it may have been easier to do something else. I don't think it would have been, but it might have been. But you listen to the voice who are on the margins, who are deepest in the struggle of just trying to survive and create a quality of life for their kids. You listen to that, and then that helps to determine what next steps are taken. And that, to me, is solidarity.
I feel that you could...
And the other thing is, I didn't, and I don't mean this in any way judgmental, please, I don't, but it just reminds me of the hard decisions of when you leave a situation, that even working from home, I get it. But for those, and there's a lot, it's not just here, there's a lot of social service providers that are really working with folks who are on the street that are really opting not to leave, are opting to put themselves in harm's way as wisely and cautiously as possible, but not to desert those who at this moment need a lot of attention and support.
I mean, better than anyone possibly, you can give us a picture of homelessness as it is lived now in Los Angeles, which is heightened now in these quarantine situation. So, Judy, what happens to the homeless when the government orders them to, and it's their expression, to shelter in place? Where can they go while the rest of us are quarantined?
Yeah, no, I think it's a critical question, Paul. And there are trying. I love the government because it's a little slow. That was a little cynical too. It's like the next 2 weeks are supposed to be critical. They're supposed to be critical. And even as the debates are raging about can we open this hospital, or what about this motel, and all of that is being debated by those in power. Meanwhile, these 2 weeks are moving forward, and there are some emergency things that if it was a priority, it would happen. There needs to be showers, there needs to be bathrooms, there needs to be sanitation, there needs to be soap, there needs to be water. What's being done as we're trying to ease the huge number of people that are living on the street. You can still go up and down almost any street, definitely in Koreatown, and still see the tents right next to each other. And so I do think folks have some awareness, but, what about folks in prison? What's happening there? What about all the children that were separated from their families at the border and held in, we sort of laughed when they said don't have gatherings more than 10. We have 35 people living here. We weren't going to have 2 different dinner times or separate the families. I mean, it's like, that's fine if you have a home, even an apartment to go back to. But there's a lot of folks for whom that's not the reality.
So how
we have to just keep pushing.
So what do you do? How with the tents? I mean, I'm not asking you for a solution, Judy, but you have such knowledge of this situation for dedicating really your life to it. These tents, these homeless people who are living in very close proximity, who are asked to shelter in place, who don't have another place to go to, people in prison, your dinner table with 35 women and their children. What can be done?
Some of it is just immediate. I mean, all the hand sanitizer is off the shelves, but there are ways to ask corporations or those who have access is to just keep in mind those who are in a very different place than maybe they are, and do some emergency things. And I know people, the outreach we've received after the fire has been amazing. People have wanted to help. Our crisis after the fire is, I'm not minimizing it, but it's like we've gotten tons of help, and we're just trying to get it out to other people, other agencies that are trying to help those who are actually still on the street. But then you got to push your officials. You got to push the city council people. You have to push the county board of supervisors. This isn't anything we can debate for another, 2 months, 3 years. It needs to happen now. And when government really sees something needs to happen now, they make it happen. There was, traffic at L.A. airport, and all of a sudden now there's a new parking lot and there's 2 lanes, and they got that fixed like an overnight almost. It's like this has to happen now. My hope is that all those folks who felt so strongly not in my backyard might understand the importance of the bridge housing that every city council person is supposed to have in their own area. So maybe there won't be so much resistance. Maybe it will be a push, the coronavirus thing, to really recognize that people need a place to be safe and off the street, not just because of the virus, but because it's not a safe place to live, especially for kids. So I have to stay hopeful, and I have to keep, we were in, I don't know if you know this, but if anybody hasn't seen it, they filmed the Justin Bieber Quavo song Intentions. They filmed it here at Alexandria House. And
how can one find it?
You can go on our website, www.alexandriahouse.org, and look for Intentions. You can watch the video. You can see it in YouTube. It's had over 25 million hits or likes. It's an amazing thing for me for several reasons. One is you see among the families, and most of the families in that video were some of the families that were impacted by the fire. You see joy and you see happiness. It was a fun filming event. You see a sense of community. They filmed it in the dining room where we actually eat. The little kids were dancing on the table. It's a great video.
I will watch it. Tell us the video. Tell us the website again, and then I want to ask you. And then I want to ask you, how can those people who are listening to us help you?
So it's www.alexandriahouse.org, and you look for the title of the song is Intentions. And you can click on it and you can find it. But you can also find it on YouTube under Justin Bieber and Quavo Intentions. That's the name of the song. The very end of it, I get one line that says, we need to speak truth to power. And if people can do anything, it's to speak the truth that we're not being the society we ought to be. And we need to speak truth to those in power and say, lots of people are saying that we're better than this. We need to be supportive of those who are on our margins and really make this a country where people feel safe and welcome and really one of equity.
Judy, with the word equity, I will bid you farewell for now. I will watch the video, and I hope that all the listeners who have heard you feel that there's a lot to be done and a lot of good to be done. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for doing these tapes.
Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you again when we don't need to be 6 feet apart.
Sounds great, Paul. Take care of yourself.
You do too, please. Bye-bye.
We'll do it. I promise. Bye-bye.
To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, Go to dublab.com/support